At best, they have blank stares and dead eyes. Talk to a store clerk and you'll see. Offer a good afternoon, you get a blank look if you get eye contact at all. If you do, it'll be hard to believe there's a soul behind what looks like a glass doll's eye. The kids are not okay. The youth are not okay. The teenagers of the 2020s are melting down like Reagan McNeil possessed by the devil. Faced with everyday, ordinary tasks, they scream, "Mother, make it stop." These kids, they're beyond disaffected.
Stop. Mother, make it stop. 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 Make it stop.
Welcome to Disaffected. It's February 22nd, 2026. I'm your host, Josh Slocum. This is the show where we talk about politics, culture, and relationships through a psychological lens, and what an ugly psychological picture it's going to show us tonight. We're going to start out with the sorry, fragile state of young people. Gen Z and Gen Alpha are unable to get around in the world without freaking out. My dentist, and then some other dentists, are telling stories of teenage girls and teenage boys who refuse to walk down the hall to the exam room without screaming or collapsing on the floor because it's going to hurt. You won't believe the anecdotes. Of course, since it's a day of the week ending in Y, there has also been another mass murdering tranny. This time, a right-wing roid rager in Rhode Island who killed his son, killed his ex-wife, and then killed himself at a high school hockey game. We're also going to check back in with the work of psychiatrist Hannah Spier. We've had her on the show a couple times before. She's got a new provocative article out on whether what we call borderline personality disorder in women is just a euphemism for female psychopathy. And yes, I'm going to talk about good old mom, so get your popcorn out. All that and more coming up tonight, right here on Disaffected. Let's talk about spoiled children. We have been raising spoiled, stunted children in the West for at least 2 generations. Millennials had maturity problems that were previously unseen in young adults, but Gen Z is much worse. It remains to be seen how the majority of, I don't know if they're calling them Gen Alpha or Gen Y, how they will turn out, but there are already some troubling signs. As always, I'm referring to averages and trends, not to specific children, and of course, not to your children. Of course, there are young people who were raised more competently than the kind I'm going to describe. The other day, I was in the dentist chair again for yet another crown. When I'm there, my Gen X hygienist, we're going to call her Sandra, she often gives me reports on the youth today. She's got a 16-year-old son with a number of friends his age, and the difference between her son and his friends is something that she finds remarkable. She won't let her son have unfettered access to a smartphone, which other moms tell her is weird. When she hears obscene music coming out of the phone of one of her son's friends, she makes him shut it off. And remember, the obscene lyrics in music in the 2020s are actually obscene, far beyond anything Generation X remembers as obscene lyrics in most music from the 80s and 90s. It's way beyond that. As an example, look up the lyrics to the most popular song of 2020, initialized as WAP, or Wet Ass Pussy. The other kids find Sandra's behavior genuinely baffling. Sandra is old-fashioned and strict, they say. Most of the kids from the past 4 generations have thought that of their parents too. It's a common complaint. But what's different today is the extremity and the degree to which true sexual and pornographic obscenity is considered normal and unremarkable to these young people. And obviously, it seems so to their parents as well, because they don't do anything to prevent this rot from entering their kids' eyes and ears because they don't think there's anything wrong with it. Sandra, my dental hygienist, she sees the evidence of bad parenting at her job too. She told me a story the other day that genuinely shocked me. I'm not easy to shock. I've seen a lot of things. It's common now, according to Sandra, for kids, including teenagers, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, to be so frightened of getting dental work done that they cry and sometimes scream on the way down the hall back to the exam room. Yeah. No, and they're not crying or screaming once they get in the chair or when they're about to get a Novocaine shot and get their tooth drilled. They are crying and screaming in anticipation of any dental work, even the kind that doesn't hurt. This is not the normal fear of shots that most kids have. And it doesn't only happen when they're scheduled for something that requires a shot. It's happening for routine cleanings and exams. Sandra said that one of the worst of these happened a couple weeks ago in her office. A girl of about 14 years old who was seemingly normal. And by this, I mean, she didn't appear to be special needs or whatever modern euphemism you want for the mentally retarded. This girl, 14 years old, started screaming in the hallway as she refused to walk further down the exam room. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt. The girl then threw herself onto the floor and got into a fetal position, refusing to move, but panicking and flailing. Her parents, yes, astonishingly, there was a father and a mother, picked her up, bodily picked her up like she was a little baby girl, and carried her back out to the car. Now, Sandra told me that while that was the most extreme she'd seen, exaggerated panic and crying and attempts to refuse the care are not rare instances. They're becoming common. She says to me, "What is going on with these parents?" Both of us, Sandra and I, we remember, she's about my age. We remember being kids under the age of 10 years old who were scared of the dentist, didn't want to go to the dentist, and who didn't like getting shots. I remember crying myself as about an 8-year-old. I was a nervous, frightened child, which is no surprise given the home I grew up in. But I never refused to walk down the hall. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a fit. I mean, sucked to be me. I had to have a number of cavities filled at a young age, and that meant a number of Novocaine shots and tooth drilling. But of course, I quickly learned that the initial pain of the shot just wasn't that bad. It's not like childbirth. It's not like an infected tooth that involves a nerve. It's nothing like that. And I also learned that the pain from the shot went away immediately because the shot was full of Novocaine, right? It doesn't take long to make these connections. So I calmed down and I stopped fearing the dentist as a kid. If my mother had allowed me to melt down and avoid the chair, avoid the drill, I might have ended up like these poor kids that Sandra has described to me. And, when I criticize the deficiencies in the younger generations and the parenting, it's not out of personal pride. I don't have any desire to gotcha young people. And my ego doesn't get 2 sizes larger by cutting down young people. That's not the motivation. What's going wrong with young people is not their fault, but it is down to their parents. The buck always stops with the parents, no matter what. There's no but. There's no but and after that. Don't try to put one on. The buck stops with the parents. There isn't anybody else for the buck to stop with. Now, this is the place in a monologue like this where some people are probably starting to write a pushback comment that they're gonna put out, accusing me of, and they will use this word, blaming parents and not understanding how society and the schools and cultural forces are making parenting so hard. No, I don't misunderstand that. I don't lack understanding of that. That's not the case. I have two responses to that. Yes, parents today face pressures from smartphones, the internet, deranged Marxist indoctrinated public school systems, and a media environment that is soaked in normalized hardcore pornography. Yes, today's parents face problems that my mother didn't face. That is true. They're not whining when they say that. It's much worse today for parents than it was in the 1980s and the 90s. They're not wrong. Here's the second response. Parents are still the ultimate responsibility, even still, even if it's hard, even if it's unfair. That it is hard and unfair doesn't remove one jot or tittle of the responsibility for parents to make the hard decisions. It doesn't remove any of the responsibility to say no, even if saying no makes their kid the only one in class without a smartphone. You still have to say no. I am not sympathetic to parental attempts to excuse themselves from their moral responsibility to safeguard their kids and to raise them. There's a reason we use the word raise when we talk about child rearing. Raising kids means bringing them to a higher level year by year. That's not happening today. So to parents, I say, if not you, then who? All of this, modern inadequate parenting, a perverse society, a corrupt school system, parents who don't seem to have a clue that they're doing wrong. All of this makes it hard to see how anyone can help young people, help bring them to something that looks like actual adulthood. What I described above, the story I described above, is severely abnormal. It's not a little bit abnormal, it's severe. This is something that would have gotten you psychiatrically diagnosed 20 years ago, and quite rightly so. This is toddler level, literal toddler level behavior in children who should have grown out of that 10, 14 years earlier when they were toddlers. Something's gone very wrong in their upbringing, and we see the continuing consequences because they're becoming young adults and they're now taking over college campuses. They're, marching for Palestine. They're shouting at Jewish students. They're inserting themselves bodily between police officers who are trying to conduct lawful arrests of illegal aliens and much more. This is not normal. How can concerned older adults approach this when much of the young generation see us the way Mao Zedong taught a generation of young Chinese communists to see their own parents? Who is going to listen to someone who is one of the four olds? And though many kids in the younger generation are hostile to older people like me, maybe older people like you, who'd like to see standards, and though they don't believe this, a lot of us, me, some of you, we older people genuinely care about their well-being. It's not the only thing we care about. We care about ours too, and that's valid. It's reasonable. Yes, I am concerned for our safety and our ability to get along in society when these kids become our peers, but I'm also concerned for them. I want to help younger people raise themselves to a higher level than they're at now, as caring adults did for me when I was young and lost, and I was very young and lost. But honestly, as young and lost as I was never this bad. Even going through what I went through, I wasn't this incompetent. But the thing is, I fear some of these young people. Yeah, I fear them. And for good reason. Because if they could, they'd wish me and a lot of you into the Twilight Zone cornfield. I've got another anecdote for you, this time from the barber shop that relates to this. I usually wait too, you know this because you watch me on the show. I mean, sometimes I got my hair slicked back like Don Corleone because it's too damn long to do anything else with. I'm a cheap, miserly Yankee, and I wait too long between going to the barber shop. But it's actually one of my favorite errands to do. 20 years ago, I found my barber. His name is Clay. Clay's Barber Shop. Get it? His shop was just happened to be the closest one to my office at my new job at the time, 22 years ago. So I've been going to Clay ever since, even though I now live a 45-minute drive away. And I go because there's no nonsense, no expensive scented branded products for sale, no contractual deals that Clay is obligated to try to force me to buy. There are just black chairs, a coffee table, a bathroom, one barber's chair, magazines, and a coat tree. That's it. Oh, there's a broom too. Clay is my age, so he's about 50. Over the years, I've watched his children, his girls and his son grow up because the pictures on his counter change. The girls have been on the gymnastics team. His son was on the lacrosse team. They've got pictures of ski competitions. And Clay also manages the art of being friendly without being overly chatty. Now, if you go to a salon, a largely female or gay male run salon, the woman or the homosexual doing your hair will talk your goddamn ear off because that's what most women and gays want. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but it isn't what I want. I was like that as a younger guy, but as I've aged, I've gotten much less chatty, and I'm more interested in peace and quiet while a necessary chore gets done. Clay hits the mark. He gives friendly chat, but just a moderate amount, and nobody feels weird when there's 10 minutes of silence and the only thing you hear is shears snipping. So we were in one of those silent periods last week when Clay was cutting my hair, but there was a lot of chatter in the room, in the waiting room. And I could see it in the mirror. There was a really excited 3-year-old boy who was waiting to get his hair cut with his mom and dad. Again, shockingly, a mother and a father. He was one of those kids that most people would notice. First of all, he was exceptionally pretty, like Gerber baby pretty, but in a 3-year-old age. But he was also so obviously brighter than average. You could see it in his eyes and his smile, and you could hear it in his babble. This kid was tuned in and switched on. Everything was fascinating to him. The height of the chairs was fascinating. Could he climb one by himself? Turns out he could. And all those magazines with the colorful pictures, cars, trucks, golf clubs, and his favorite, National Geographic, which he could not get enough of. The entire time I'm watching in the mirror, he had this big smile on his face as he pawed through the magazines. And then he did his best to put them all back in neat piles, but 3-year-olds can only do so much in that arena. And as he went through this, he was babbling in that way that intelligent, bright kids do when they know words, but they can't quite get their mouth around them yet. You could hear some words from him, but he was trying to say bigger words that he couldn't quite pronounce yet. He wanted to talk, but he wanted to be heard, and he wanted to be talked back to, right? I'm sorry, I'm doing pecking beak hands. I caught myself being an actual shitty Karen the other day. I got frustrated in my computer. I shit you not. Do you know what I did? I went, no. This little kid put a big smile on my face. To me, it's still a happy surprise to see how much a child can warm my heart, because I wasn't always like that. Paternal feelings come up pretty easily for me now. I used to be one of those bitter, broken cynics, and I know in some ways I still am. But I was the kind who dragged on a cigarette theatrically while quoting friend Leibowitz on why children are unlikable because they're sticky and they don't smoke enough. I thought that was cute. I also thought it was cute to call families breeders and to call their children spawn. That came from self-hatred and unhappiness. That's what happens to unloved children, and I was an unloved child. Well, I don't feel that way anymore. I smile at the wonder and beauty of kids like this, and my feelings toward them are protective rather than irritation. It's much better this way. I won't have children of my own. I won't have a family of my own, but I can be a good uncle figure to other children in my life. And this little boy's vigor and his wide smile, joyful attitude at encountering the world was great. He wanted it all. He wanted to know the words. He wanted to be able to say all the words. He wanted to hear the words back to him. He wanted to touch all the things on the table. He wanted to figure out how piles work. And he wanted to move stuff around and make his own creation. He was engaged with the conceptual and with the analog physical world as well as the social world. Because there were old people and middle-aged guys and other people there for him to run around and talk to. This is what 3-year-olds are supposed to do. And then mom and dad decided that that little boy was getting too rambunctious. I didn't think so. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't throwing things. He wasn't acting up. He was just being a 3-year-old boy. And his being a little boy was exactly what he was supposed to be doing. And it was also doing a whole lot of good for all of us old people in there too. But mom and dad decided he was too much. So I watched mom grab her purse and pull out her iPhone. She made some gestures on the screen, cooing at him. Couldn't hear what she said, but I'm sure it was something like, "Here's your favorite YouTuber." She gave him the phone. And I watched what happened in the mirror. That little boy's eyes lost their expression and lost focus. His smile faded and flattened out. His fingers were moving across the glass screen, but they didn't seem to be focused on anything in particular. And he didn't make another sound. I left the barbershop knowing that I had just watched that boy's first steps toward parentally imposed lobotomization. Look how easy it was to put out his spark. In a few years, I will probably run into him at Clay's barbershop again. He will not be this lively. Like his parents, he will probably start running to fat until he achieves their morbid obesity. He'll have his own phone or whatever device is the new digital must-have padlock that everyone has in the year 2032. And he will have dead eyes like a doll. After the break, we're gonna get to the news that surprises no one, yet another transgender mass shooter killing family members. This time it's a roided-up right-wing ma'am! If you could use somebody to talk to about the issues that come up on this show, either in your family, at work, at home, in your social circles, I'm available to you for private, confidential, 1-hour coaching and consulting sessions by video or by phone. Check out my schedule and my booking calendar at joshuaslocum.net. Of course, I specialize in helping people work through issues of cluster B personality traits in families, sometimes themselves too. But I can also be a sounding board for you if you're uncertain about what you think about something, but you don't have anybody in your family that you trust to be a sounding board, or you can't talk to anyone at work. I have a number of clients who are concerned about these political issues, whether they completely agree with my point of view or not. I'm open to everybody. But they can't bring them up at work. They can't bring them up at church. They certainly can't bring them up at home because we're so politically divided. So if I can be that sounding board for you, I'd like to help. And one of the things I do, if you've got an acute problem, I can't solve it for you, but I can help you solve it for yourself. We're going to look at what your actual choices are, path A, path B, path C. We're going to talk about what the pros and cons are because each of them have trade-offs. And then it's left to you to decide which set of trade-offs fits your circumstances best. So take a look at joshuaslocum.net. Look at my calendar. I've still got some opening slots in the last week of February, but they are filling up. If you don't see one on there that fits your schedule, send me an email through the site, and I will accommodate you if I can. And I'm going to do right off the top of my head, I'm going to offer my discounted rate to all of you for the next week. So my regular rate is $125 for new clients. But anybody, whether you're a new client or not, feel free to choose the $95 returning client and supporting member rate. If I can make it a little easier for you, I will. joshuaslocum.net. As you're watching this, it's a day ending in Y, which means that we've had another public mass shooting and murder by a so-called transgender person. This one is an uncommon treat. The guy is a roided out, Nazi-loving, self-proclaimed conservative. To be a treat for the left. He had an insectoid cartoon body with bolted on tits, and he got the full downstairs hot dog splice and inversion where you put the inside of your junk on the outside of your body. And he went from being a white guy to a Latina woman. First, I'm going to give you the who, what, when, and where. I don't think the why needs any explanation. The perpetrator was a 56-year-old man named Robert Dorgan, who called himself a woman named Roberta Esposito. I did that NPR style. On February 16th, 2026, he was at a high school hockey game with family in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. He got out his gun and shot and killed his ex-wife. Then he shot and killed his 23-year-old son named Aiden Dorgan. Then he shot and critically injured his ex-wife's parents and a friend of the family. Then he shot himself dead, all of this taking place at a high school hockey game in front of the world and everyone gathered there. Now, feast your eyes, please, on one former Robert Dorgan, then known as Roberta Esposito, and now known as deceased. So there he is, posing in a ladylike manner in front of what appears to be a Corvette. You see, I'm going to try and see if I can do this pose too. You got to sort of scrunch your stuff up. Am I doing it? Oh, ducklet. Yeah, it's tragedy. I'm making fun of it. Mr. Robert Dorgan transitioned himself in 2020, the whole kit and caboodle with the bolt-on tits in the inverted hot dog crotch surgery. His ex-wife, Rhonda Dorgan, who was 52 years old when he killed her, she filed for divorce that same year he got his transition, 2020. Here's what's interesting. In her initial court application, Rhonda cited, quote, narcissistic personality traits as the reason for her divorce. But then she updated her filing and changed that to irreconcilable differences. I would bet good money that Rhonda Dorgan was pressured, either by her own lawyers or the court system, not to tell the truth. Obviously, her husband was a clinical narcissist, obviously. But I bet she was pressured not to tell the truth, or she'd get screwed in court for not validating his ladyhood and for diagnosing without a license. Oh, and by the way, Robert Dorgan's ex-wife, Rhonda Dorgan, didn't just have the same last name because she was married to him. She had the same last name because she was his first cousin once removed. Now, let's take a look at Robert Dorgan's transition to ladyhood. Here he is in a bathing suit spread. For those of you on audio, you really ought to jump over to one of the video platforms. This is a bodybuilder guy. Like, I guess he got breast implants, but it's almost impossible to tell if they're breast implants or the sort of steroid. Guys, these bodybuilders end up looking like they have tits anyway. And he's wearing a two-piece. Jesus Christ! And he could not look more masculine. This is not a Thai lady boy. Okay, this is a big, hulking, heavy-featured, very obvious man. Let's go to the next one, number 40. Here he is in a beautiful halter top. No, not a halter top. What is that? It's like that sling that goes around the red dress, feeding a baby. Good God. Look at the expression on his face. Look at his face. He's not smiling. He is leering. And when he became a lady, Robert, as I mentioned to you, he also ethnically transitioned to a Latina named Roberta Esposito. Bye-bye, Cucci. Now, unusually, he was a right-winger with Nazi tattoos. Like, we got another pic where he's showing off the full sleeve there. SS lightning bolts with the skull in front. Pretty. Look at his fucking face. Big ugly fuck. Pretty. Now, on social media recently, Mr. Dorgan, while he was live, he gave us a clue about what might have been coming up. He got very angry at a post by actor Kevin Sorbo. He was the guy who played Hercules on the TV show. Kevin Sorbo tweeted this with a picture of Tim McBride, Maryland representative who calls himself Sarah McBride. Kevin Sorbo wrote, "Tim McBride is a man. Community note this if I'm wrong." And oh, it looks like his name was in transition. Roberta Dorgrano said, "Keep bashing us, but do not wonder why we," goes to all caps, "go berserk." Is this enough yet? Have we had enough yet? Will we stop pretending that there is anything mentally normal about being trans? Will we stop pretending that it is possible to be a man trapped in a woman's body? Will we stop pretending that some girls are born in the wrong body and are actually boys? Will we stop pretending that autism explains this? Will we start to acknowledge that borderline, narcissistic, and antisocial personality traits are the obvious underlying issue in the vast majority of transition cases? Will we acknowledge that it has always been true and has always been obvious that these people are severely mentally ill, commitment level mentally ill? Will we accept that Norman Bates in Psycho was not a made-up transphobic trope, but a known criminal profile? And it is. Maybe. But the cast and crew of the classic 1991 thriller Silence of the Lambs is hanging on to the floating door like Rose in Titanic, even in extremis. For those who don't know, that film was the story of a transvestite serial killer who murders women and makes literal skin suits out of them on a sewing machine. It was based on real-life serial killer Ed Gein, who did literally make a skin suit out of his mother. Yes, these men do have deranged mothers most of the time. I have to go back here. No, I'm not saying that that means their mothers should be murdered. Yes, I am saying that there is a reason these men turn out that way. And in the vast majority of cases, you may check behind me if you don't believe me, but you have to actually read the literature. You can't just ask Grok if that bad, mean man on Disaffected was lying. You will find that the vast majority of them had severely personality disordered and extremely distorted relationships with their mothers. Here's actor Ted Levine this week. Ted Levine played the titular character, not titular, actually. I just want to say that word. He played the serial killer tranny, Jamie Gum, who was also known as Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. Here's what he had to say recently, as of, I think, last week. "We all know more, and I'm a lot wiser about transgender issues. There are some lines in that script and movie that are unfortunate. It is unfortunate that the film vilified that, and it's fucking wrong." And you can quote me on that. I didn't play him as being gay or trans. I think he was just a fucked up heterosexual man. That's what I was doing. It reminds me of a line. It reminds me a lot of a line from one of my favorite comedy parodies. If you guys haven't ever seen it, it's called The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra. And it's a send-up. It's about 25 years old now. It's a send-up of 1950s black and white B movies about aliens that come to Earth. And the conceit is that there are a couple of space aliens, a man and a woman, who crash land, but then they have to pass as human while they're fixing their rocket ship. But they give themselves away because they talk in this strange way and they get drunk at a dinner party. And the wife alien says something about, I like to shop at a store for cloth funnels. That's what I can do." So Ted Levine from Silence of the Lambs says, just a fucked up heterosexual man, a cis straight white man. That was the problem. That's what made him a serial killer, not his personality disorder, not the cluster B mother that the character almost undoubtedly had. It was his straight manness what did it. I got nothing else to say about that. So let's move into the female psychopathic portion of this show. As you know, the thesis of Disaffected is that we are living in a cluster B society. Cluster B personality disorders are kind of mental illness that's unlike the kinds of mental illnesses that probably come to mind for you when you hear the term mental illness. For those of you who've been with us for the 5 years that we've been doing the show, I know you've heard this before, but I do repeat things because new people come into the show all the time, and I want to bring them back and get us all on the same page with each other. So we're going to go over a couple of basics again. I'm going to describe what I call classic mental illnesses, the things that pop to your mind with that term, and I'm going to do that to distinguish them from personality disorders. But please know that I do understand there is crossover and that people who have personality disorders can also have these mental health symptoms that I'm talking about. It's not necessarily either or. I'm not saying it's either or, so insert your own not alls. We do have to be able to make generalizations to describe categories. That's a necessary part of understanding each other. So first, a refresher on what personality disorders are. Another term for them, at least the cluster B personality disorders, there are clusters A, B, and C. I'm concerned only with cluster B for the purpose of this show. Another term for them is character disorders. They describe who someone is, who a person is on a deep level. That's why the word personality is used. So in that way, they are not like a mental health condition that can come and go, like depression or even acute anxiety. Though, of course, yes, often people with personality disorders can experience those too. But lots of people who don't have personality disorders also experience depression and anxiety. Personality disorders are deeply ingrained, gut deep, distorted ways of feeling and thinking about yourself and about other people. They're markedly deviant from the societal norm, from what society considers normal. And that's not just a relative judgment. There's an absolute aspect to this as well. People with these personality disorders have morally disturbed ways of relating to others, problems keeping a job, problems holding relationships together, and more. But worse, the people around them suffer as much or more often as the person who has the personality disorder. Now, some of the everyday terms that you would use to describe someone with a cluster B disorder include manipulative, emotionally out of control, extraordinarily selfish and narcissistic, exploitative, parasitic, and other things like that. If you have met a person that you would describe with those terms as someone who exhibited those traits most of the time, that's very likely someone with a cluster B personality disorder. So if you think you haven't met those people, you have. There is not a single person who has never come across a cluster B. That's just not statistically possible. You have known that person. Many of you have them in your families. Many of you have them in your families and don't know that that's what's wrong with your family member. But even if you don't, you've met them at work, you've met them at church, you've met them at the post office. Now, allegedly, there are 4 cluster B personality disorders. I say allegedly because I believe that most people who truly have cluster B personality pathology don't fit into only one of these 4 so-called discrete disorders. They're not discrete. Some do. There are people who hew very closely to a classic borderline-only personality or classic narcissistic-only personality, but most people have a mix of traits from more than one of the 4 categories. So I'm going to give you a very, very brief overview. The 4 cluster B disorders are borderline. They're emotionally unstable, afraid of abandonment. They're often suicidal, manipulative, and they sometimes tip over into disconnection from reality, psychosis. Narcissistic personality disorder. These people are fundamentally selfish with a hugely inflated idea of their own worth, talent, or importance. they are very prone to use others. Histrionic personality disorder, wildly over-emotional, but in a way that seems insincere, as if they don't really feel the big emotions that they're performing theatrically. An antisocial personality disorder, you know this by the street terms sociopathy or psychopathy. They're callous, they have a complete, not just an impaired, but a complete lack of empathy. They're often parasitic on others. They live on other people's money. They use people with no regard to their safety, well-being, their feelings, or even their ability to continue to live. Now, my mother is cluster B. She fully fits the criteria for both borderline and narcissistic personality disorders. But I believe she fits the criteria, she fits some of the criteria for sociopathy as well. I'm going to give you a couple of anecdotes to show this because it makes it real. And then I'm going to turn to the really good work of psychiatrist Hannah Spier. She's not going to be on tonight. We'll have her on again soon, but she's been on twice before. You remember her from 2 prior appearances. Her Substack and her podcast are called Psychobabble. Highly recommended. She has just put out an article asking if borderline personality disorder in women is what we would call predatory or sociopathic if we saw the same behavior in a man. As a child, well, not just as a child, my whole life, that's why I don't talk to her anymore. My mother was wildly emotionally dysregulated and combative. She could go from elated happiness to suicidal despair within minutes or hours, and it was frequent. She would scream at her children constantly. Nothing ever satisfied her, ever. She could never be satisfied. She lied frequently. She accused her children and her friends and her siblings of things that they didn't do. And she lied and claimed that she hadn't committed wrongs that she had in fact committed. Reversal, they're always the victim. Someone else is always the perpetrator. Even if they break a person with a cluster B personality disorder, you could catch them in the act of breaking the glass on a jewelry store to go in there, and they would lie and claim they were a victim of a company that did not manufacture safety glass sufficiently to keep them from being cut. That's what cluster B would do. Now, in my home, my brother and sister and I, our childhood was filled with verbal and physical violence. My sister and I were both institutionalized in glorified orphanages during our teenage years. As usually happens, to kids from families like this, we were labeled troubled and we were labeled incorrigible, and we went to kid jail to pay for the crimes that my mother actually committed. If you're interested in more detail, I covered this in the first year of the show, year 2020. Look for the episodes Over the Borderline, parts 1 and 2, 2-part episode. A lot of detail there if you're interested. Now, 12 years ago, I bought a second house that I could not afford to save my mother from homelessness. It was foolish, but I was still brainwashed. I hadn't broken out. I didn't even know what personality disorders were. My mother was always being kicked out of apartments because she had back rent. She basically never fully paid her bills. I did. Within 2 years of my mother moving into this house that I bought for her, she made my life an unbearable hell. Yelling, screaming, constant demands, constant lying, incessant nagging. I mean, dozens of text messages to me during the workday, even when she knew that I had important meetings. She would not stop no matter what I said. It took over my life. She exploded in rage on her disabled husband and threatened to hurt him by putting a hole in his head, and congratulated herself on not splitting his skull open and only leaving holes in the walls of my kitchen from throwing iron skillets. 10 years ago, my sister and I woke up and realized that our mother was not just depressed, but personality disordered and dangerous. I evicted her from my house in court. I had to go to court. She wouldn't go on her own. And then I evicted her from my life. We've not spoken since, and I won't have contact with her again. That part of my life is over. But during that fractious time, I saw a side of my deranged mother that I hadn't noticed before. I knew that she was unstable emotionally, like a person with borderline, but I didn't understand her capacity for conscious cruelty until I told her no for the first time in my life. During the eviction process, She threatened to call Adult Protective Services in the state of Vermont and file elder abuse charges against me. And her husband joined in on these threats. What were the grounds for my elder abuse? You're going to think I'm making it up, but I'm not. I would not agree to be my mother's drug dealer. I would not agree to run marijuana to feed her addiction. She called that elder abuse because she said she had a medical need. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I was actually afraid that she would make up convincing lies to Adult Protective Services. Then she started calling some of my colleagues to make them think that I was psychiatrically unstable. She camouflaged this by saying that she was just concerned about me. She was concerned. I didn't seem to be taking my antidepressant medication because I wasn't acting normally. And then she and her husband sent letters to my supervisors at work accusing me of being an abuser of old people and asking them if they thought that I was a safe choice to continue in my role as the public face of a nonprofit that had a reputational liability. This is my mother. In plain terms, my mother and her husband tried to get me fired. They tried to take away my living, and they tried to take away my professional reputation so that I couldn't be rehired. I had to, in humiliation, explain to my board of supervisors that my mother was mentally deranged, to apologize that she'd dragged them into the family drama. This is when I began to ask myself, is my mother a psychopath? What else can explain a conscious, gleeful desire to throw your own son into poverty and try to ruin his reputation so that he couldn't find work again? What mother would do this? That was 2016. In 2020, during the COVID panic, the letters from her husband started up again, flowing to my supervisors at work. I could tell that my mother was telling him what to write. It was a ventriloquist act. In these letters, he called me an anti-vaxxer and a Trumper and said that I was a menace to public health and a reputational liability to the human service organization that I worked for. Once again, my mother tried to impoverish me and to destroy my career 4 years after I stopped contact with her. This is what I mean when I say that people with cluster B disorders rarely fit into only one category. My mother fits borderline, and she fits narcissism to a T, but I can only describe these vicious attempts to hurt her children as psychopathic. So let's turn to psychiatrist Hannah Spier. She's one of the only working professionals I know who sees these issues largely the way I do, or at least that I've noticed, who speaks about it in public. And she's questioning if we're letting mentally disordered women off the hook by saying that they merely have this softer cluster B called borderline personality disorder. I'm going to read you a portion of her recent piece called Borderline, the Euphemism for the Female Predator. Hannah writes, imagine an individual whose life is a consistent masterclass in the violation of others. This person demonstrates a profound disregard for right and wrong, operating with a total lack of empathy or remorse for those they hurt. Their primary mode of engagement is manipulation and deceit, using a sharp wit or a performative charm to con others for personal gain. They are a creature of impulsivity and irresponsibility, prone to reckless risk-taking, unable to keep a job long-term, and a chronic failure to plan for the future. When challenged, they pivot to aggression and violence, exhibiting a disregard for safety that borders on the criminal. They lack long-term relationships as people involved with them expose who they are or get tired of the abuse. What you envisioned while reading that paragraph was almost certainly a man. The behavior maps onto the diagnostic symptom list of the classic antisocial predator. But if we adjust the criteria for the female expression of the same traits, impulsivity becomes high-risk promiscuity, violence becomes the destruction of someone's reputation, deceit starts to include the performance of the seductive female, and reckless disregard for safety becomes the threat to hurt themselves, then this picture maps onto a borderline woman perfectly. Now, Hannah used some video. We're going to play a 3-minute video. For those of you who like these cop videos, this is a treat. It's a young woman being stopped in a car by a police officer, and we see her. She does appear to have borderline personality disorder. She cycles through various tactics and various emotional affects to fight the police and try to get her way. After the video, I'm going to give you a summary of how Hannah described this and urge you to read the whole article. So let's roll SOT 100, please, Kevin.
Can I go for you?
Yeah, DJ.
What's up?
What's going on?
Nothing.
Nothing
I
at
wanna
all.
talk to you later.
Alright, okay.
So don't try
But
to
I know
act
you're
like you
18.
know me.
I know you're 18.
I'm not 18. You got that wrong.
Alright, how old are you?
Doesn't matter.
How old are you? How old are you?
Doesn't matter.
Alright, what's your name and date of birth?
Why?
I have a lawful reason right now to identify who you are because you're not getting out of a state vehicle and they
I am
requested
a
me here.
Okay. Then if you get the out of here and get the away, I'll step out of the car.
I step back for you. It's okay, just go ahead and get your stuff out
No,
there.
this is why y'all think y'all have rights.
No, you think you have rights.
No, I
but you
know
don't
I have
But
rights.
you don't know them. But you don't know them.
You don't know them. You think because you're in a
Oh, man,
uniform,
that's
you're
that for it right
entitled.
I don't think I'm entitled to anything, ma'am.
Then can you step out of my motherfucking way and let me talk to my caseworker?
You get out of the vehicle and go
around.
Get out.
No.
I'm telling you right now, this is your last chance.
I'm
Get
out.
out all the way
Get
out.
no.
Get out all the way out of the vehicle. All the way. Go over there.
No.
Step over there.
No. Get.
Step over there, away from the vehicle. Deja, I'm only I come back.
I don't.
When I come
Get
back.
out.
I'm
Don't
telling you
step
right now,
to me.
what
Get
I'm
the
telling-
away.
Don't put your fucking hand in
Get
my
the
face.
out of
I'm
my
gonna tell you
face.
right now. Don't touch me and don't put your hand in
I
my
ain't
face.
touching you.
I'm telling you right now, don't put your hand in my face. Alright?
The is it at, G? Where's the at?
Okay. So now,
Bye.
get out of the
She wants
car.
you to catch her outside.
Get out of the car. I told you now.
No, I want to request emergency. My head.
Fake.
Can
Fake.
I please talk to him?
Yeah, I'll bring it over here.
Can I talk to Alicia? It's so fun. Can I please talk to him? Can you? I'll stop fighting, but can I please just?
Yeah, you'll talk to her in a minute.
Can you please?
Don't put your legs in
No,
here.
can you please also request from my head? I have trauma to my head. I just want to talk to my. Stop! I can't breathe when you do that. Please just. Can you please just stop?
She's being a victim now. Notice this. She's trying to appear helpless.
Break.
You're in my custody. You're in my
And you
custody.
assaulted me.
You're in my custody now.
You had no right to.
Give you
I
every
want to
chance.
press charges against you.
You-
You're gonna stop.
You can.
You
Well,
monster.
that is your right.
You want me to lie to grab me and you f***ing do. I want to press charges. And I want to go to the hospital for medical attention. I have a right to request that.
Okay. Hannah's article that includes this video illustrates what's actually going on. Hannah describes this woman is actually a predator, but she's being treated more gently than she should be because she's a woman. What she's actually doing, in Hannah's words, is displaying, quote, parasitic entitlement, using dominance strategies, weaponizing therapy speak by saying things like, I don't feel comfortable and I feel unsafe. And then the spin out to full active confrontation when none of that works. And wait a minute, stop for a second. There are some of you out there. Right now, you've already excused this. You've already said, oh, she must be drunk or on drugs. Stop, please stop doing that. Most of you've been drunk. Many of you have been on drugs too. Most of you have been drunk. You didn't act that way when you were drunk, did you? It's not the alcohol. It's the personality disorder. No, these women are not just wounded birds. They are predators. We're going to ask Hannah back on the show sometime soon to get deeper into this topic, because if the West is going to get a handle on the decline of our society, that has to include recognizing that predatory females exist and too many of them are in the driver's seat. Now come back after the break for my story of how I met the Right Reverend Jesse Jackson, or more nearly, how I almost met him until he decided not to complete the meet and greet. Then we're going to close out the week with a refresher introduction to a disaffectant character favorite from my past, Miss Shelby, my first boss at my first grown-up newspaper job. Disaffected is brought to you by BiltonUSA.com, purveyors of some of the finest thinly sliced cured meats I've ever had. If you don't know what biltong is, you are in for a treat. Think of it like the most gourmet beef jerky you've ever had, except it's not beef jerky. It's not ground up and pressed together. It's not a Slim Jim. It is whole, high-quality beef, thinly sliced and cured with vinegar and spices in the traditional South African way. The Van Buren family runs the business, and they are from South Africa, so they brought it over here. They've got a new facility where they make it all in-house, family style, in Texas. Check out BiltonUSA.com. The meat comes in varying levels of spice. You can get absolutely plain Jane vanilla with just a nice little herb on it. You can get it a little spicier. You can go all the way up to ghost pepper. And depending on what's available in season, they also have exotic meats. So there's venison and sometimes other things too. I don't want to say it in case you really want it and they don't have it, but definitely check out their selection. And while you're there, don't forget to look at their other products. Biltong and their sausage, cabanusi, which I also recommend. This stuff is really good for you because it's high quality protein and animal fat, no carbohydrates. But for your carbohydrate needs, look at their sideline business of imported European groceries. They've got some English biscuits, which we call cookies, that are so good, I almost made myself sick eating the whole box. I suppose I shouldn't say that in a food commercial, but the stuff is wonderful. Visit BiltonUSA.com and be sure to use promo code JOSH to get 10% off your order. Jesse Jackson died last week on February 17, 2026, at the age of 84. He was a friend and associate of Martin Luther King, and he was with King in the motel when King was assassinated in 1968. Many Americans saw Jesse Jackson as a civil rights leader who founded organizations like the Rainbow Coalition and then later PUSH. But many others saw him as an egotistical opportunist. I met Jackson years ago at a congressional hearing. Well, I almost met him. So, back in 2009, I was the executive director of an organization called Funeral Consumers Alliance. It's a nonprofit educational protection organization. It was mainly educational and designed to give grieving families Consumer Report style information about how to choose a funeral home, how to choose funeral arrangements, and how to do this without being upsold, taken advantage of financially at a time of grief. But the group also functioned as a citizen consumer lobbying organization for consumer interests when state or federal laws that affected those arranging funerals, when those regulations were being debated. And I'm going to explain to you, I know it all sounds weird. It'll make sense. As one of two staff members, I was the executive director, the website manager, the trash taker outer, the media spokesman, and the regulatory affairs guy. So during my 20 years, I wrote briefs for court cases, I gave depositions and testimony, and I helped draft state and federal regulations and statutes to better protect American families from funeral fraud. In 2009, there was a cemetery in Chicago called Burr Oak that became embroiled in a scandal. This was a historically black cemetery with a number of famous burials, including Emmett Till and Dinah Washington. People discovered that the cemetery's owners, and yes, they were black, were digging up old graves and throwing the bones on the ground to make room for new burials and thus more money. And I saw the video footage and I saw the photographs. They were indeed digging up skulls and tibias and femurs and throwing them into a refuse pile at the back of the cemetery to resell the graves. So you can easily imagine the fury that this caused for families who had loved ones buried there. At that time, a U.S. representative from the state of Illinois called me and asked for my organization's help with this issue. That included drafting state statutes that could better detect and better prevent this kind of abuse. And then I was invited to testify as a consumer advocate and an expert witness before a congressional subcommittee that had formed to investigate the case at Burr Oak. And that hearing was held in Chicago. So I arrived at 7:30 in the morning and met with the legal team that I'd been working with, and they introduced me to several of the families who had loved ones buried there who were slated to testify. A few minutes later, in walks Jesse Jackson, and he came over to our group. We were all standing around in the back of the room before the hearing got started. Now, it's important to understand that Jesse Jackson had not been involved in this case, and he was not on the team preparing testimony or legislation. And one of the lawyers actually told me sotto voce that Jesse Jackson, that he was not, nobody was expecting him to show up, and he had not contacted anyone involved in the case, not the families or the lawyers, before appearing out of the blue that morning. He was also not scheduled to appear as a witness. So he comes over, and Jesse Jackson starts shaking hands with the family members and telling them how sorry he was, how sad, how outraged he was. And then the lead lawyer on the team introduced me to Jackson, describing me as the consumer advocate who'd be giving testimony on what kind of regulatory reforms we needed. So I held my hand out, and Jesse Jackson held his hand out. But before we could shake, a television news camera crew walked over. I shit you not. Jesse Jackson did this. Didn't complete the handshake, turned around, turned his back to me, and immediately pivoted to the cameraman. He instantly adopted an affect of a wounded outrage and began delivering a monologue to the camera about the great injustice. Now, naturally, given the fact that he was Black royalty, Jesse Jackson was added to the roster of witnesses at the last minute, and he took up so much time speaking on the panel that family members weren't able to say very much, and he positioned himself on the spot as their spokesman. I don't know what they thought of this. So we almost met, but not quite. So some of you have heard of her before, but some of you are new to the show, and thank you very much. I want to introduce you to kind of a background character on the show that you will hear from time to time when I slip into her voice. This woman, Shelby, was my first grown-up boss at my first grown-up job after college. I was a cub reporter at what we used to call a chicken dinner newspaper, a weekly community newspaper. I lived in a rural town in Virginia, and this was the Amherst New Era Progress. And the building had been fully renovated in 1962. So when I came on as a staff photographer and staff writer, we were all still sitting at those giant metal desks that had institution green Formica inlays with chrome around the edge, and they all weighed 500 pounds, big metal file drawers. Big honking desk set phones with actual ringers on them. This was not late 1999, early 2000. Yeah, late 99. And the highest technology we had in the entire place was a fax machine. So everything had to come in. I did the police blotter. I sound like such a grandpa saying these things. It doesn't seem that long ago to me. But they all came in by fax. The obituaries came in by fax. The press releases came in by fax. And we all had to type up and transcribe everything. So the job was an awful lot of fun because you had to do some of everything. I was a reporter, but I was thrown out to every story, whether it was a fire or a tragedy or covering high school sports, which I was absolutely terrible at. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was also a photographer. So it was me and a Nikon with 3200 speed, really super grainy, black and white Kodak film, push processed to 6400 so I could get pictures at night of action shots in basketball. Well, the head lady at the Amherst New Era Progress was my boss, and her name was Shelby. Now, let me tell you about Shelby. So, there was the publisher who was the owner, and Shelby was the head lady under the publisher, and then there were two editors, and then there was my level, the staff. Shelby made the decisions about what we was gonna have and what we was not gonna have. Now, let me tell you what Shelby looked like. Take a picture. So Shelby was a 1990s updated version of the mother-in-law character from the show Bewitched named Andorra. So she had what I call menopause red dyed set helmet hair, blue eyeshadow, and like a lot of ladies her age, she had a very pink lipstick. Now, Shelby was one of them ladies what wore her mouth upside down. She had a half-lidded expression and an eternal frown. You can recognize this kind of lady if you look at what is that actress, that Betty Davis, in the movie that was not the one in Juarez. It's when she was an actress, All About Evenings or something like that. Now, Shelby was a white lady, but she had that accent that sort of crossed over into how Southern black ladies talked. And Shelby was one tough customer, and she wasn't gonna take no guff from nobody. Well, me, Ben, and Michael, we were the we were the staff writers, and we wanted the internet. Remember, it was almost the year 2000, and the bigger daily paper had the internet. We didn't have the internet. We were retyping everything. So we were plotting together, how are we going to get Shelby to give us the internet? And we came up with a plan, and I was the designated pitchman. Now, I was a little afraid of Shelby because I had to walk all the way. She was like the mean principal. You know, nothing ever made her happy. So you didn't really want to ask for things, but, you know, she was the one who signed the checks. So I'm walking down the hallway. Actually, you know what? Let's give you a picture. Kevin and I worked on her for about an hour and 15 minutes. It's not perfect, but it is damn close. I give you digital Shelby. you see how she she turned her mouth upside down to register dissatisfaction. Always looking at you from them heavy lidded eyes. So Shelby, this is how Shelby answered the phone. Bring, bring. Amos Nelson Publishing. And she always did it exactly the same way. I used to sit in my office with Ben and Michael going, Amos Nelson Publishing. So Shelby's sitting behind her desk. She would always say, if you want me to know something, write me a memo and leave it on my desk. She pronounced it desk, D-E-S-T, leave it on my desk. So I walked in and Shelby was sitting behind her desk, just waiting for me like a spider. And I'm trying to be all chipper. I say, Ben and Michael and I think that we should get the internet. Now, I know it's an additional expense, but I think it's actually going to save us money because it's definitely going to save staff time. You know that our Nelson office has the internet now. The Lynchburg News in Advance, which is our daily competition, they have it. They're getting stuff out faster. I know we're weekly, but this is going to save a lot of time. And Shelby's just in there like, sit there listening to me. And I go through my whole spiel. And she says, well, why don't you write me up a memo and leave it on my desk? So I tried one more time to extol the virtues of the internet. And while I'm giving my pitch, she's sitting behind a desk like this. Just drumming her fingers. We don't need no internet.